Book goes into on page 324 then in section 2 into some facts about the presidency. A lot of these will be reviewed. For instance, the executive branch is found in Article 2 of the Constitution, and we've gone over that. It's not real precise though. Article 2 was kind of laid out to be kind of general, and the founders knew that Congress would kind of fill in here and there where they're supposed to do certain things. One term in Section 2 it does talk about is the Electoral College. So let's remember a couple things about the Electoral College. First of all, there are 538 electors. That's one for every person in the House, one for every senator, and then 3 for Washington, D.C. So 538 total electors. And remember, please, that the Electoral College that elects the president, it used to be where you wouldn't vote for the president precisely. You would go on election day, Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and you would cast your vote for an elector. And then that elector would go spend about a month and a half researching the presidents or the candidates. And then after about a month and a half of researching, and they would go make the decision themselves when they cast their vote. So you wouldn't vote for president, you would vote for an elector who would then go vote for president to represent you. Kind of like what we do in Congress, where we vote for somebody to go make the laws in Congress for us. However, now that's all been turned around. The party system has kind of eliminated the importance of the Electoral College, because the Electoral College now, it's a winner-take-all system. If a candidate wins a state, they get to take all of that state's electors, and the electors just go vote for who they're told to. Like when Obama wins California, all 55 of California's electors will now go cast a vote for Obama, because you got 55 Democrat electors and you'll have 55 Republican electors. And since the Democrat wins, and he will win California, then the 55 Democrat electors, they get to go cast their vote. So we've kind of watered down the whole Electoral College thing. So it really isn't all that important anymore. Your book also does go into a few more things on page 325 about the presidency. For instance, it talks about the term of office. We know that the terms are 4 years long, and we know that because of the 22nd Amendment that presidents are only allowed to serve 2 terms. Maximum 10 years if you happen to serve 2 years of somebody else's. So you've got 4-year terms. You've got 2 terms maximum of your own, but a maximum of 10 years if you serve 2 years of somebody else's term, and then you can still run for 2 of your own. We also have the qualifications of being president. You got to be at least 35 years old. You have to be a natural-born citizen, and then you have to have lived in the U.S. for at least 14 years, so that you know what's going on and you know the kind of the common things that are in the news, and you know the issues, and so those are the official requirements for being president. And then lastly, you've got the pay. $400,000 per year is what the president gets. Used to be $200,000, but with Bush, the second Bush, George W. Bush, the pay went up to $400,000. You also get a lot of benefits, a lot of expense accounts, a nice pension, and everything else. But yeah, the presidents are well taken care of. Also in this section, it talks about presidential succession, about who takes over for the president officially if the president is incapacitated or if the president dies in office. So Amendment number 25 is a presidential succession amendment, and it sets that order of succession. Really, the only ones that I'm really worried about you knowing is that the first person that takes over is the vice president, second person is the speaker, the third person would be the pro tempore, and then after that it's the cabinet members. And it's in order of creation of their cabinet post. So you don't really have to know all of those. I don't really mind. I don't really care if you know, Secretary of State, Treasury, Defense, and then Attorney General. That's not important. Really, it's the VP, the Speaker of the House, the President pro tempore, and then cabinet members. Now that same 25th Amendment also states that if a vice president somehow dies or cannot do their job. Then the president selects a new vice presidential candidate, like Nixon did with Ford, and then the Senate, as usual, would have to confirm that choice. And then lastly, what you have in this section 2 is the impeachment of the president. If you remember, there are 4 things you can get impeached for: treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. Treason and bribery are kind of more obvious. High crimes would be more like federal crimes, like the 6 that Bill Clinton committed. Or misdemeanors really it's a small crime, so they were holding the president to a pretty high level when they said a misdemeanor can get you impeached. Remember that it is the House of Representatives that actually impeaches the president, and impeachment doesn't remove you from office. Impeachment simply is an official accusation. There have been 2 presidents that have been impeached. That's President Clinton and President Andrew Johnson. But after you go through the House impeachment, then if you are impeached by the House, then there's a trial in the Senate, and neither one of the presidents, either Clinton or Johnson, were actually removed from office. Because if 2/3 of the Senate votes yes for the trial, then the president will be removed from office and you lose your job. Section 3 on page 330 goes over some of the executive powers. We'll cover them rather quickly because we've already touched on a few of them. The president's main job is the chief administrator, because what the Constitution actually says that he's supposed to do is to execute the laws. He says to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Executed just means that they're carried out. So the president's job when Congress passes a law is, if that law needs something special to make it happen, the president maybe writes an executive order, or the president does something in his cabinet, in, let's say, Department of Education or Department of Energy, and they'll do something to put that law into action. So Congress passes the laws, and the president is in charge of making sure that those laws are implemented. That's his job as the chief administrator. He uses his cabinet mainly to do this. He has now 15 cabinet posts, and Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, all the way down to the newest one, the Secretary of Homeland Security. And then they go out there and really get busy on executing these laws. Now, the president is also the commander-in-chief. And this is where Washington was just freaking awesome. Maybe the best commander-in-chief ever, as well as the best president ever. So you can't start a war if you're a president, but once a war is started, you are in charge of it. You lead the military, you direct the military. And if there's no war, you're still in charge of the military. You still help direct what gets built, how many soldiers that they're going to be, things like that. Of course, you can't do anything without Congress because Congress controls the money. So presidents before have gone to war, but Congress has decided we're not going to pay money anymore. And in the Constitution, it says president has to go to Congress every 2 years to ask for more money if he wants to keep the military moving along. Now, in 1973, your book mentions the War Powers Act, because what some presidents had been doing was they would put our soldiers somewhere around the world to fight, but they wouldn't call it a war. So they don't need Congress in that case. The entire Vietnam War was actually never declared. There's really officially no such thing as the Vietnam War. It was just more of a police action. We sent our military over there because one of our ships got shot at. And so we started a war, and we were there for a long time. But officially, there was no war. So the War Powers Act simply limits the president's power to send troops anywhere he wants to around the world. That's a pretty important one. In addition to commander-in-chief and chief administrator, he's also the main foreign policy maker. Congress isn't allowed to deal directly with other countries. Treaties, executive agreements, all those kinds of things are made by the president, with 2/3 approval of the Senate for treaties. The president also appoints ambassadors. He accepts other countries' ambassadors. He extends what your book calls recognition to a nation, and if we officially recognize a nation, it means now trade is easier with them, and getting the United States to recognize you as a country is kind of a big thing. It's kind of like the oldest brother recognizing the littlest brother. It just kind of gives you it makes things a little bit more easy for you. Executive agreements we've already talked about in class. They're not real treaties, but the president makes an agreement with another nation to do this or that. And then your book mentions that about 90% of all of these foreign policy agreements are executive agreements. It doesn't require a treaty to do. Still in the same section there on page 332, your book starts talking about the legislative powers of the president. He's not allowed to pass legislation, but he sure can have an effect on it. For instance, it starts with talk about State of the Union address, where he gets out and he lays out his policy agenda. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to get done this year. He can also call Congress into session, and then he can adjourn Congress. Most of the time, Congress does this on their own. But if the president wants to get something special done, he'll call a special session of Congress. He can veto legislation. On page 332, he starts to go over the veto idea. Now, this is his number one legislative power, that if Congress passes a bill that he doesn't think needs to be done, he can veto it. He can veto the entire bill. Of course, it goes back to Congress, and then Congress can override that veto with a 2/3 vote. We've talked about that. You also have the term line item veto. A line item veto is when the president, he doesn't have to veto the entire bill, and the president can veto portions of the bill that he doesn't like. Now, this was passed under Bill Clinton, but it was quickly outlawed by the Supreme Court, who said it's unconstitutional for the president to have that much power. And it certainly is a lot of power to be able to go through a bill and just decide, I like this part but not this part, and just take out parts of it. It's almost like the president is then passing his own laws, which is Congress's job. So the Supreme Court shot that one down and said it's not going to be allowed. And then lastly, on his legislative powers, is the most controversial one of all right now. It is the executive orders, where the president is supposed to use an executive order to execute the law. Like Congress makes a law, and then the president passes an executive order to implement the law that Congress already passed. Unfortunately, presidents really since FDR have used the executive order to create law. Like if Congress won't pass what they want them to, what the president wants them to, then the president will simply pass his own executive order. It's sad, but the president is in effect, he's making his own law by doing that. On page 336, your book talks about the president's judicial powers. He does have powers within the judicial branch as well. Most of them deal with nominating judges, all the way from the Supreme Court all the way down to a lot of lower levels. The president appoints a lot of judges. For instance, this next president, whoever wins this election, most people say that there are 2 Supreme Court justices that are ready to retire. And if they retire, the president appoints their successor. And then, of course, the Senate, once again, has to approve by 2/3 vote. So the president nominates judges, and that's a very big power because he puts them in their place. The president can also issue pardons and reprieves. This is, if you remember when we studied the Constitution, this is called the power of clemency, especially with the pardons. If the judicial system sentences somebody for a crime, the president can simply say, I disagree, and he pardons them. It keeps the judicial branch from having the power to just put people in jail if they want to without having a lot of evidence. The president can stop that from happening by using his pardoning power. But of course, our presidents have also abused that power a little bit in the past. Senatorial courtesy is one term here, and talks about with when the president does appoint a judge for a certain state, that you go to the senator of that state before you get the okay, and you make sure that the senator agrees with you, because the senators know a little bit more about their own state than a president does. So senatorial courtesy is to allow the senators to have a say in who you appoint. A couple last things under the judicial powers of the president. You have the Solicitor General. This is a person, the Solicitor General, as their job is kind of like the White House lawyer, because what you do is every time a Supreme Court case comes up, and the president, what he'll do is he'll have the Solicitor General get the case ready, and the Solicitor General will be the person that goes and argues the case for the president or for the White House, for the executive branch. You also have an amicus curiae. This is on page 337 at the left side on the bottom. An amicus curiae, a friend of the court brief. What happens with an amicus curiae is that the president gives his opinion on a case. Maybe the Solicitor General is not even arguing in this case, and the president simply makes the amicus curiae to say, this is what I think ought to happen. And that has some weight because the president is a very powerful person.